Welcome to the Media Roundtable Industry Edition, which means we're less focused on creators and more about how media and audio industry experts can adapt to the news of the day. We go a little further behind the scenes to talk about the business of audio and the secrets of the craft, which allow brands and creators to impact audiences and culture through the work that they put into the world. I'm your host, Jennifer Laine, and today I'm joined by Dan Granger, founder and CEO of Oxford Road.
Hello.
Hi. Stephen Abraham, president of Oxford Road.
Watcha.
And a special guest today, we're joined by Joseph Jaffe. Joseph Jaffe is the author of 5 books, has a podcast, Joseph Jaffe is Not Famous, is a consultant and thought leader in the marketing and innovation space, working with Fortune 500 companies and startups alike to deliver innovative and practical advice for movement towards growth. Welcome, Joseph.
Well, in light of the fact that I don't have an Oxford backdrop, I'm just going to kind of air horn myself in or try and create some more smoke and mirrors.
Well, you have a lava lamp, so you win automatically.
It was one of the things I just wanted, but also my shelves behind me are essentially the story of my life, and there's stories for everything that you see there. And who knows, with my show, there may be some Easter eggs and prizes. So I'm kind of working on the background. It is real, the background.
This is some real Taylor Swift Easter egg data then. We're going to have to pop quiz you.
No Taylor Swift there. My daughter forced me to listen to Taylor Swift on a 16-hour drive to St. Louis. There's no Taylor Swift.
That sounds like a deep conversation that would take up our entire hour. So maybe
Indeed.
we should speed over right now. Because okay, actually, first things first, you have some huge fans here, as I'm sure you're already aware, and it is one of the reasons, if not the main reason, we've asked you to join the show, apart from your obvious industry insight, which is invaluable. But amongst the many things you've been able to achieve, do you want to just talk a little bit about the moment you wrote Flipping the Funnel, what it meant at that time, and maybe sort of give the audience an overview if they haven't been able to read it? We're huge fans of the book, but would love to have you sort of explain some of the gravitas behind it if you're open to it.
It was the third book I wrote, and I always to this day I'll describe it as the best book I'll ever write, which is a problem because I peaked too soon. And but to me, it's the silver bullet of everything. It's the meaning of life. It's the meaning, it's retention as the new acquisition. Without your customers, without your employees, you are nothing. You have nothing. But it was bigger than that. It was this idea of the funnel. Why does the funnel get smaller over time? Why does it not get bigger over time? Why do we have diminishing marginal returns and marginal utility from our media spend? It just made sense that we should continue the dialogue, or actually the D of dialogue is one of them. So I actually almost approach it like a child, which is like, that doesn't make sense. That's dumb. That sucks. Why does the funnel get smaller? So I came into the whole custom experience, the loyalty business as an enthusiast, and I almost used my ignorance to my advantage by asking questions that people that were in the industry either had stopped asking or were blind to. And so instead of AIDA, which is awareness, interest, desire, action, the traditional funnel, I flipped that and I created a DEAR, which is acknowledgement, thank you, dialogue, incentivization, and activation. And I actually believe that over time, retention becomes the new acquisition. You can build your business, your brand, your base as a creator, as a whatever, from the inside out through loyalty, advocacy, referrals, engagement, what I call priceless experiences, things that money can't buy. So that book is very special to me.
Well, and especially when it comes to the experiential element of that, you were so far ahead of your time. I know Stephen would love to dive into that a little bit as well.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, Joseph, other than your sporting allegiances, I am a big fan. And, I remember very fondly the book 13 years ago. I think at the time you were in Omnicom and I was subsequently then an employee at Omnicom. So I'd like to consider us both alum. My question sort of stems from that, which is, since that time, there's been obviously all sorts of different developments. I often use that book still to this day in presentations. So firstly, that is a big shout out and a big fan. But, Oxford Road's 10 years old this year. I've been with the company. It's going to be almost 3 years towards Q4 of this year. 2013, which Dan can speak to, the changes that have been in the audio industry since your book and what has happened, and especially with the advent and the explosion within the world of podcast, which I would argue is possibly one of the most lean-in media that you have and stimulates some of the most, I would say, avid levels of loyalty amongst fans, specifically around passion projects, because of the content creation doesn't necessarily come from a point of wanting to advertise at the beginning, but purely to get your content out into the world. What do you see has been the most impact there? And how do you see, with your own podcast, Joseph Jaffe isn't famous, which we could also argue, but what do you see has been, the most interesting aspect of that development of audio media in reflection of how you were positioning, the AIDA or DAIDA, as you say it?
There's so much to pack into a response. First of all, I probably was one of the first marketing podcasters in the world back in 2005 with Across the Sound with Steve Rubell, which became Jaffe Juice. I always saw then and still believe today in the power of audio, how powerful it is. And, I've had Dan Pink on my show, and he wrote a book called Regrets, How Looking Backwards Moves You Forward. And so I embrace one of my true regrets, which is abandoning or giving up on my audio podcast. I think I've talk about being ahead of your time. That's the problem, is that sometimes you get very lonely and disillusioned and isolated, and you give up. And at the time, I was kind of very threatened by or insecure from the Mark Marons and the ESPNs and the NPRs jumping on the bandwagon and almost crowding out the original creators. But now fast forward to where we are today. I look at Joe Rogan, and I always ask people the question, which is how many episodes of his show had he published before he was acquired or syndicated or whatever the deal with Spotify? And the answer is about 1,500. Well, here I am. I'm sitting on probably 500. I've still, I haven't even hit the halfway point of the marathon. So where's audio today? Audio is, to your point, one of the most intimate, I soul search. I think to myself, why am I doing a video show? Because look at this face. This is the typical face for radio. Like, why am I doing a video show? Why do I have this bee in my bonnet to want to be a business talk show host, the daily show for business? And that's why, because I feel like this entire television world, this video world, needs a show and needs a host. But let's go back to audio. Well, first of all, there's an audio version of my show, but there's something so intimate about that beautiful, it's not even captive, it's just intimate audience. During COVID, when I went running 3, 4, 5 times a week, I even remember the first time I ran in COVID, I thought, if I twist my ankle and fall, I'm just going to, like vermin and virus, that I was just, no one would touch me and I would just like decay away. But Tim Ferriss and Howard Stern and all of these people were in my ear every day, almost like a friend, like a confidant, and moved me through this whole experience. And then there was the whole social audio advent and Clubhouse. I'm in a different place now. So 2 points that I just want to throw back at you. One is, I was definitely on the whole bandwagon of this idea of like, you can't fake your voice. Your voice is the thumbprint. It is the DNA to your soul. It is the window to your soul. These days, I actually think everything can be faked and deep faked right now. So I don't think audio is immune from, but I think it might be the last bastion to actually be protected from all of this AI shenanigans, if you will, of which, I'm embracing it, but I'm still afraid by it. But the other thing is, again, I think we're going to see a new kind of audio emerging, what I would call community audio or private audio. Every morning I do in Alpha Collective's Discord server a coffee, virtual coffee, call it the Collective Cafe. I actually predict that every company that has any value in this world will have an audio first pre-work solution. So a virtual coffee, 30 minutes, 1 hour before work begins, where people can connect with one another, manifest, meditate, AMA, just hang out and be inspired. And so I don't even think audio's best days are, not only are audio's best days not behind, I don't even think we've hit the peak of the power of shared audio, social audio, communal audio. The difference is, and the $1 billion question is the big M word, monetization, right? Are we thinking of audio as a media channel, media property? If so, how? There are a bunch of solutions. My first book was called Life After the 30-Second Spot. One of the chapters was called Music, Mobile, and Things That Make You Go, And, and the iPhone didn't exist yet. So again, I'm excited by it. I'm actually excited by, sometimes we overthink this. What is audio? Audio means you can't see me right now. And sometimes I don't want to be seen. Sometimes, the quintessential, my hair is in rollers, or I'm in a bathrobe, or, I'm in bed in my pajamas. Sometimes you don't want to be seen. And so this thing called your voice is powerful, like you cannot believe. So it's very contextual too, in terms of recognizing how magnificent this is. And again, can't take video on a run with you, can't really take it with you. Audio is still the one ring to rule them all.
Well, and to your point of not wanting to be seen, I think that really feeds into the intimacy of the channel as well. Especially, some of the deepest conversations people have are not looking into other people's eyes. They're sitting in a car looking forward, and you're just able to say and share so much more, because that sort of self-esteem or sort of nervousness goes away a little bit, because you are able to speak more freely without having somebody look at you in a potentially judgmental way. And I think that it really bodes well for the audio industry. And especially some of the points that you've hit on, we are going to touch on this later today, but like the developments and the advancement or sort of growth we've seen around co-listening in the audio space, I think sort of support some of the theories that you're diving into as well.
Yeah, and we just need better solutions. And that's the power of innovation. I'll give you an example. Bookmark, the simple ability, when I'm on a run listening to audio, there still isn't a product out there, and you would think Apple would be the ones to introduce it, that just allows you to hit a button or say a word, and that audio clip is bookmarked. Whoever does that, this is an idea for anyone in the world. Go do it. Make $1 billion. Just send me a tip. But for me, that introduction alone will be a tipping point in of itself, where now nothing, as they say, ironically, it goes in one ear and out the other. How do you start to actually collect and capture these amazing moments of inspiration and insight? And the answer is the simple ability just to freeze that moment, go back and download those clips. And now you've got something really powerful.
Especially as audiobooks continue to rise. 20% year over year from last year to this year, bookmarking will need to take shape in many different ways, not just in podcasts. And maybe it will be the next $1 billion company, but you could start first as well.
I know. Yeah, I should. In fact, I need to go and start and incorporate mine.
Well, I think a couple of points there also, which you touch upon, and I couldn't agree with you more, Joseph, but I seem to recall actually when we were together in South by last year, where we met at one of our events, there was a gentleman from iHeart. He was a senior creative leader, and he actually alluded to some of the things that you were talking about the power of the voice. And even there was one comment he mentioned on one of our panels, which was, even in the VR world of Meta, as it's now called, the truly remaining human piece that's there for individuals when they're participating is voice, right? Obviously you can alter it, and Chat GPT, I'm sure, can make you sound even better, but that retaining human aspect is still so important. So I'm very glad to see that you're leaning in on that.
And I'll tell you one other thing. As much as I believe in, I mean, one of my favorite podcasts right now is Diary of a CEO. And I'm just loving it at the moment. And I've become a little bit tired of Tim Ferriss, who's just become a little too cerebral for me. But I go through my phases, and I'm forever grateful. I would be his assistant any day of the week, Tim Ferriss, that is. But kind of going, but when I thought about my show, Joseph Jaffe is Not Famous, I actually built it on 4 pillars. And I'll work backwards to the one that I was going to, to the one that I want to address to what you were saying. So the 4th was Web3, which is community for the most part. The 3rd was diversity, equity, inclusion, and access. The 2nd one was the creator economy. And the 1st is what I called the streaming era, but specifically live. I'm very interested and intrigued in the power of live. And those are the things that make the copying and the imitation and the editing really hard. And so I want to be my manifested goal for my show is not to have one viewer's comment via Facebook or Twitter come up as the token comment, but actually have comments coming up the whole time, having a truly listener-driven and listener-powered or viewer first. And that you can't copy that. You can't really imitate the power of live. So I think if you can find the balance between the live and then the long tail, and have people obviously choose, that to me is a 1-2 punch.
Well, and especially when it comes to lots of the traits that Gen Z and others are looking for, live reinforces that. I mean, one, the authenticity that comes through in live is far more than something that they believe is edited, et cetera. But the level of trust there is exponentially higher. Which I think,
and it's going to attract certain specific types of audiences. Obviously, I mean, I follow a lot of podcasts, mostly sporting podcasts, and you can imagine the live opportunity of speaking straight after a sporting event or just before a sporting event that we all know very active and, shall we say, vocal fan bases that there are out there, I think lend itself to some really interesting opportunities. I tend to call it perishable media because if you're not there in that moment, it really doesn't matter if you've heard it or not, and you need to dial back into it in the next week. But the opportunities that I see there are exponential in terms of really touching base with that audience. So yeah, I would definitely agree that's the space that's untapped at the moment for marketeers.
And I'll just add one more thing, which is I actually I use the analogy, and this actually happened. I was with my best friend in Mauritius several years ago.
As you do.
Yeah, Spurs fan as well, and we went out deep sea fishing, and we caught beautiful Dorado and amazing fish. We came back. I've never really deep sea fished before. And so we came back and we kind of held the fish, took the obligatory photographs, and they kind of got hung on a hook, and then 3 or 4 people arrived and they took the fish and they put the fish down on the ground and they cut the fish open. It gets a bit graphic, and they started to gut the fish, etc. And then they disappeared. And we went to the beach and we had some nice rum cocktails. And the next thing, they all arrived with platters of I would say Nobu quality sushi and sashimi and all these different platters and plates. And that became the analogy for me of how I think about content. That's why I love video first, by the way, because with video comes audio, and with audio comes a transcript, and with transcript comes quotes, and with quotes come beautiful backdrop and etc., and little 1-minute video highlights and 1-minute audio highlights. And suddenly you realize that from that beautiful piece, that 1 hour piece of video is your tuna or your Dorado. And then depending on your creativity and your skills, you can cut, slice, dice, and turn it into sushi to feed an entire village for a while. And so that's how I look at it as well. And to me, that's why we've seen all these audio podcasters embracing YouTube and video as well. It's not a chicken and egg. we know what came first. Video came first. It always did come first, right? But now what's happened is to create audio without video is a missed opportunity, and so these podcasts are audio first podcasts, but now with video, they've just created so much more dimension and richness. And well, I'm just approaching it from a different perspective. And in order to create a video product, you need more than just talking heads. You need sound effects, and you need, transitions, and you need video clips and B-rolls, etc.
Yeah, and that brings up actually an article we wanted to discuss this week. And I know there are opposite sides of the coin on this, but YouTube and podcast. And there's been a lot written, and we've talked about it a lot. And I get, we agree with you. I mean, the atomization of video content, how it feeds down into audio, or audio first, and how it feeds down into video, I think is a really interesting topic. It's opening up new audiences. Obviously, a lot of people who are new to podcasts are finding it on YouTube. Younger listeners, 18 to 34, prefer to watch it rather than just listen to it. But I know also there are arguments on both sides. Ashley Carmen had an article in Bloomberg that, Dan, I think you did the best summary of, if you want to dive into that as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've been talking a lot over the last few months about the epiphany of YouTube to podcasters and podcasts to creators from other social channels, right? You've got TikTok stars now pushing their content on a podcast or having a designated podcast. You have a lot of influencers doing that. But, in our community where we're talking to brands who are using audio, they're trying to figure out how do we deal with this? When is it a simulcast? And when is it a YouTube video? And, who should manage that? And how do we budget for that? There's a lot of different, it doesn't fit in the typical model that people have been trying to adapt to. And the debate, I think, that is starting to happen with Ashley, where the whole world was saying, if you're not on YouTube yet, get your podcast on YouTube. It's easy to upload. And Ashley kind of came back and said, well, not everybody cares. And there's a lot of independents that don't want to play this game. And, I love Ashley. I think she's the best. She's been on the show. And I just think some of the work she does in our industry is really a cut above in terms of investigative journalism. But I feel like she may have missed the trick here by oversimplifying the issue, because it feels like the assumption in her argument is that it's all or nothing. You have to set up a camera crew and produce video that looks like it is well produced in order to have a podcast on YouTube. And I think what we all know is, no, at minimum, can you throw up a logo? Can you put up one image and just play your podcast? Because if that's where consumers want to consume, let them do it. Don't limit your distribution platforms when you've got a free asset here that's very easily searchable. There are people who treat YouTube the way that they treat iTunes and Spotify. So why not just be there and let it live? There are some people who may decide that they want to invest real resources into creating a visual experience. I imagine that some percentage of the people that are now consuming podcasts, specifically on YouTube, are using their eyes. They are stationary. They are ready to watch something. And if that's true, cater to them if you can. But I don't think you have to decide, we're going to cater to them or we're not going to post there. Everything needs its proper place. And until we have some sort of an eye tracking study or, some research that tells us what percentage of that consumption is truly visual, it's jumping the gun to make too many assumptions anyway. So I would just say, let's not overcomplicate the thing. If you make media, try to distribute it where people are going to consume the type of content that you want, and don't limit yourself because you think you've got to be Steven Spielberg on the production, when in reality, people just, they're fine seeing what we're doing right now. Some people, there's 11 people that may want to watch this version. But if there's 100 that want to listen to it through YouTube, let them do it, and don't cut yourself short. So that's my kind of hot take on that article, because it was the first time I saw anybody actually try to argue against the movement to leverage YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, my answer is a very simple one. Yeah, why wouldn't you? Again, it's it's and not instead of, and and for me, even when I describe my show, I describe it as the daily show for business with a little bit of Wayne's World thrown in for good measure. And so,
Wow.
the dog barking and the warts and all is kind of part of the charm. Of course, it's progress instead of perfection. This is more of a corporate problem as opposed to a streaming solution, right? The corporate problem is the pursuit of perfection, the vanity. And of course, the world is anything but perfect. I mean, I've got my Rodecaster 500, my entire rig costs less than $1,000 and then some. It includes a $30 Walmart ring light, and I've probably spent my Rode microphone is probably $350, $400. But I can put out a show, the quality of which can rival any broadcast quality show, because there's only one of me, and I look at the talent aspect of it.
Absolutely.
Some people are masochists. They want to inflict pain on themselves by looking at me, but that's their own right. But also it's my job. And the thing is, the tools are there. Like I use StreamYard, and StreamYard changed my life. And, I'm leaning into whenever there's a new change, I play around, I do things, I make it my own, I customize it, I personalize it. I experiment, and it works for me. And so, I mean, to any corporate out there, it's like, of course you want to put it on YouTube. And if it helps raise your game and be a little bit more, plugged in, then go for it. But you don't have to actually, I mean, I'll just tell you, I had Richard Owen on my show years ago, because I've been doing it for 3 years. And he actually said, it was interesting. He said, all of those people, the Kimmels, the Kimmels, the Colberts, et cetera, he said, they're all descending into Wayne's World. Ironically, that's what he said. And then all of you, pointing to us, you're raising your game every day. Every day you're getting better. You're getting smarter. You're figuring it out from an authentic standpoint. They are backpedaling. They're taking their show and cutting it and slicing and dicing, and no one's watching live anymore, at 11:30 at night or 10:30 at night. And so like kind of they're falling down, even Trevor Noah seemed to be going through his own identity crisis in terms of how do I dress and what, and so in a way, what's happening is there's this beautiful leveling of the playing fields where we are much more comfortable on YouTube because it's all we know, as opposed to them that are kind of descending into this chaos that we just call, life.
Well, I think it's interesting because up until this kind of pivot, the media has dictated what consumers are supposed to be consuming, and that's shifted now. The media companies are having to adapt and modify themselves to how consumers and audiences out there want to get their messages received. I mean, younger people don't necessarily care whether you've had hair and makeup before you come on screen. They just don't. In fact, anything, they're pushing back against it. They want the lo-fi quality because it's what speaks to their lives. So I think you're absolutely spot on.
I got the hair.
I would have said at least 1,300 for your setup. So kudos to you.
Yeah, I was going to go in that ballpark too. I would say that.
Whose setup? You haven't even seen my setup. It's in fact, I would show
We're
you.
Feeling it.
My office is so dirty but the thing as well is that I've been around in the space for long enough that I remember the first marketers going, I don't care that you had a PB&J sandwich for lunch, talking about Twitter. And I remember the YouTube one. This is like really for the OGs out there. They're like nobody wants to watch someone running and ramming their head into a brick wall. That was the example. Because they were looking at YouTube production value and they just didn't get it. And I don't know if we'll get to it, but then comes along, and it's interesting. There's a twist with Mr. Beast. Because Mr. Beast is Mr. Beast is the Super Bowl of video
Right.
In many respects on a daily basis. And even he is trying to be like, pick me, choose me, just remember me. But at the end of the day, the production quality, and it's not the perfection, but it's just there's just something so original about the video that everyone else is just playing catch up.
All right, so tell me if you've ever heard of any of these companies. Indeed, Shopify, NetSuite, Headspace, Quip, Theragun, Postmates. You know, I'm not only the host of the Media Roundtable, but also CEO of a company called Oxford Road, and we are the world's leading independently owned and operated audio ad agency. And what that means is that we help great companies, many that you have probably heard of on some of the other podcasts that you listen to. We help them test and scale campaigns in audio channels, with podcast being one of those leading channels. Some of the work that we do includes media planning and buying, as well as analytics, attribution, and insights. And we also have a very special way that we deal with creative and copy generation. We have our own proprietary process called Audiolytics that allows us to score ads for their persuasiveness. If you're looking to be involved in audio and you want a partner that can help work with you to make sure that you achieve unprecedented ROI and massive scale, you should get in touch with us at Oxford Road. And by the way, the only reason that we're able to do the work of the Media Roundtable is because we have a great team at Oxford Road that supports us and makes it possible. So, you know, what we're doing is not just a podcast, but we're really trying to help brands live out their values and balance that with their business objectives, which is an increasingly hard thing to do in this world of misinformation and malice that's infecting so much of our media. But at Oxford Road, we don't want to just broker this stuff. We want to impact the industry for good. We want to raise the bar on what gets created. And Oxford Road is helping make that possible through the Media Roundtable. So if you're somebody that's interested in working with an ad agency or a partner on this type of work for your advertising campaigns, go to oxfordroad.com. It's easy to spell. And get in touch with us, or at least just sign up for our free newsletter, The Influencer. That's oxfordroad.com.
We'll link this in our show notes too, but some other really interesting areas, like ESPN has gone from 3 shows to 28 shows, and they attribute it towards retention and listener duration. And also like the analytics that are associated with YouTube, whereas the analytics that are associated with podcasts are very different. And that presents a very compelling case as well.
I want to make a point, which I think is perfect, which is, you know, when I wrote Join the Conversation, I went on, that was my second book. And I walked people through this evolution of media from the one to many, which is the spray and pray approach, the shotgun approach, or as I called it at the time, the Dick Cheney approach, because it was very topical at the time. And then that went to like one to one, and then one from one, which was search. And then it moved to what I called the many to many. And the many to many was social media. And I won't go into all the intricacies of it, and because there's a bit of nuance, but what I call it now is the sum to sum. So what I've witnessed in Web3 world with communities, with NFT projects, with 28 shows versus 3, is that the actual critical mass that we need now is much smaller. And it is an acute and inherent problem for brands that want to just reach the most number of people with the least number of steps. It doesn't mean you won't hit the reach, but you just have to work harder, and you need a bigger portfolio. There is no one size fits all. That's just the reality of it. So, you know, for me, what I've realized is I don't need 1 million people to watch me. I don't need 10 million. I don't need even, quite frankly, 500,000. I need probably 5,000 or 2,000 or 10,000 or 50,000. The number I need is so low. And so like in my mind, in my demented mind, you know, my romantic, idealistic mind, all I want is for some desperate person at CNBC to say, all right, fine, just leave us alone. We'll put you on at 12 midnight on a Sunday going into Monday, when literally 13,000 people are watching, you know, because they've got insomnia, or they're, I don't know, you know, they've, you know, smoked a joint too many or something like that. And they're just like, you know, whatever, like, just give me that number. Just give me 13,000. Can you imagine what I could do with 13,000 as opposed to 1,300 or 130 or whatever the case may be? This is not to say that that's the end. Like when you look at the Bored Ape Yacht Club in Web3, there's 10,000 NFTs that are not owned by 10,000 people, that are owned by significantly less a smaller number. But from the few comes the many. That is going back to flip the funnel. From the few comes the many, from your first customers, from your 1,000 true fans. That is the silver bullet. If you can find your 1,000 true fans, if you can find that small number that gives you that little bit of critical mass, that's how you can grow your empire or grow your media brand in this new world.
One of the things, just to bring it back to the beginning of that leg of the conversation, how do you do that? One of the ways is not artificially limiting your distribution channels. And if there's anything we can agree on coming out of COVID, it should be that production value is overrated for most things. There are things that we watch on Sunday nights on HBO, and production matters a lot. And then there's all the disposable stuff that we make where we're really just like the monkeys at a typewriter trying to land at something profound. Like if we just, there's something about taking down some of the barriers that have, kept us from activating and just creating enough content and experimentation to figure out what's going to resonate with that core tribe. But it's a nice way to bring it back to basics.
And also,
sorry, Jennifer, go ahead.
And Dan, I just want to say one other thing, and then Jennifer, if I may, can I just say one thing before I forget?
Absolutely.
Which is, it's okay to be a monkey on the typewriter if you practice endurance, because if you just keep going, on one hand, there's that saying that says a broken clock is correct twice a day, but on the other, I don't believe that we are amateurs or incompetents. I believe that in every one of my shows, which is 1 hour, there's gold, Jerry. There's gold. There are gems. There are insights. There are 10 or 15 insights there. Not everything is going to be a home run, but there are going to be some just magnificent gems, and they can be extracted through these days AI or automation or just curation, etc. So that's the thing. It's like don't knock the monkey at the typewriter, because if that monkey can keep going long enough, they will. It is the maybe he's another animal. It's the tortoise and the hare. We're going to win by being the tortoise. We are not going to win by being the hare. It's just the way the story goes.
Totally.
Well, okay. So we've first found your next company to make $1 billion. Second, we've named your forthcoming 6th book, Finding the 13,000. And now, in the vein of putting out written pieces, I'm going to transition a little bit to our agency, because it is a related topic, but we put out a white paper this week on solving for audio ad attribution. It's gotten a little bit of press, and I know we've talked about this topic quite a bit in recent podcast episodes, but Dan, do you want to just dive into the white paper a little bit for those who may not have read it yet?
Yeah, I would love to. So we have been talking recently about on this program about attribution, which, if you don't work in performance marketing, is maybe one of the most boring topics in the world. But if you do work in performance marketing, especially dealing in audio, it's an ever-present concern. And there's really been no good answer to it. A lot of people thought, well, the pixels are here, the pixels will save us. The pixels have not saved us. And we believe in using multiple redundant methods. In many cases, pixels have made channels visible in their performance to us that were before a complete mystery on performance. But still, there are a lot of brands that can't use that. And then there are still channels like traditional radio, which are still doing billions of dollars in volume, that have no good method if you're trying to optimize a campaign. Yes, you can do a marketing mix model. There are a lot of sophisticated ways that you can show the aggregate impact of a channel. But if you don't have a way to see on a program by program basis or a station by station basis, you really have no ability to improve your results. So people get really stuck. And one of the things that they've been stuck doing is these terrible vanity URLs, which we've been perpetrators of for the last decade and even before that, where you still have a lot of the who's who in podcasting and most audio channels telling people to go to oxfordroad.com. Here, let me tell you how to get our white paper. Just go to oxfordroad.com / solving -audio -ad -attribution. Nobody's going to do that. Exactly. Nobody listening is going to go, yeah, let me make sure I pull over, rewind, and jot that one down, and then set a reminder to go read it later. So we saw this problem of these vanity URLs that are only showing a single-digit percentage of response only becomes visible through them because most people ignore it completely. They Google the name. So to address this, we came out with our first white paper, sort of a mini ebook that we published online to help brands know how to navigate this challenge. It has been very well received. The punchline on all of it is that what most advertisers within e-commerce capability, if you are digitally native or if you are trying to capture leads online, if we can connect with your business digitally, then what you really need to do, instead of trying to traffic everybody through these very specific and hard to reach vanity URLs, we just tell people, go to the site, tell us how you heard about it. And then once we ask them in what we call the Heidi How dropdown survey, if I choose a channel like podcast, we'll say, there's a second option you can now create. Just tell us the show or station you heard us on. Historically, that was a list of as many shows as the advertiser is on, which is arduous. It's too long, and people don't select from a list of 100 opportunities. But by using predictive text, which is very simple technology to integrate today, you can prompt them by just putting a couple letters associated with a program. It will automatically suggest the name of the show. Advertiser clicks it. Now, all of a sudden, we can map it back to the performance of the program, which has increased our visibility over the vanity URLs by over 700%. So we did a white paper. We worked with some people with very big brains to put it together, and we published a case study from one of our partners, Bambi, the HR tech solution, and we're able to actually show real results, real integration, and walk you through step by step. The interesting thing about this is that it's maybe one of the most simple recommendations we could ever give to a brand. It shouldn't be a revelation. However, like I'll give you an example. Stephen and I were in New York last week. We probably met with at least 5 different companies. Every one of them needs to do this, and they kind of know it. But it's just a question of, will they prioritize it and will it see it through? And it has profound implications. So the ideas behind it are not profound. The tech is not particularly interesting, but the application of the simple use of a predictive text function when they're checking out on a website can revolutionize an audio program. And that's what our white paper set out to do. And we have seen thousands of people engaging with this now that we've put it out to the world. And we're really happy for the discussion that it's having, that it's triggering throughout the industry, starting with the brands that we partner with, because we're talking about it, quite a lot. But we're seeing a lot of people start to come out of the woodwork and say either this is great or, hey, we do a version of this and it's working fantastically well. So I'm glad the conversation is happening. It's a simple fix and it actually solves a ton of really complex problems. I'm glad we're able to get it out there. Any
sounds like
thoughts,
the QR
comments? Yeah.
Sounds like the QR code, like everyone poo-pooed the QR code and it basically saved the world. But it actually draws on one of the core ideas in Flip the Funnel, which is, how did you hear about us? It's like the most simplest question and the most powerful question in the whole world. And it just should be asked every single time anyone ever. But, there's even a concept I created called accidental ROI, which is the amount of time people go into like a supermarket and they buy Colgate Total or Crest Whitener, whatever. And some, marketing genius or advertising executive is taking credit for the fact that someone just walked past and they saw some shiny, like the sun was shining on the packaging, and they ended up buying buying it, or they reach for the first thing that they could. So yeah, I mean, that is a very powerful idea combined with, I endorse the predictive text is like I would never even thought of, but just asking someone, where did you hear about it? And like I still marvel at this. They're like, occasionally I'll be like listening to Sirius and they're like, dial 1-800-555-3155. That's 1-800-555-3155. That's 1-800-553. And you're like, shut the hell up. I'm driving a car. What do you want me to do?
It's 2023.
Jesus.
The car should be flying. Why are we still giving these instructions? Yes.
That's 1-800.
Let me ask you a question on that, though. Let me ask you a question on that, though. Why do you think people are so resistant to something so simple?
Oh, I mean, it's all psychology. I mean, it's all basically inertia, and it's like, no one ever got fired for putting.
But brands, why don't all brands just have this as a basic best practice?
I mean, why do brands continue to invest in the stupid bowl? I mean, it's like it's kind of it's not desperado. It's desperation. It is desperado. But no, look, I mean, there's a lot of psychology. So, and I'm talking about the brands as well, which is being able to change course, be able to, I mean, oh God, I could talk about this for, it's the fact that why when
different type of vanity, Joe. It's a different type of vanity.
Yeah, but why when there are, during tough times, the first budget that gets cut is the fringe budget, the innovation budget, the new media? It makes no sense. As well,
we know that.
I know.
Every agency consultant sings about that and says, spend your way through a recession because you'll come out stronger, and all your competitors are going to fall away. We all adhere to that rhetoric. It does baffle me that some of the smartest marketeers out there don't necessarily subscribe to that way of thinking,
because they're not smart marketers. I guess at the end of the day, it's like. But you know what I mean? It does, going back to this idea of investing during tough times in which budgets get cut, etc. I mean, it's insane. It's insane when you actually look at the fact that right now there are just. I'll tell you just two quick anecdotes. One is Len Hauser. I met him. He was working at Motorola at the time. I've written about him in many of my books in Austin. At South by Southwest. And he said, Joe, there are two types of people in the world. There are numerator people and denominator people. And immediately I got it. It's like I just got it like this. And I'm sure you got it too. But for those people that didn't, denominator people are just worried about the bottom line, mitigating cost, mitigating risk. They're the cost cutters. But the numerator people are looking at limitless upside as opposed to limited downside. The other story was, I remember going up to Detroit, as we called it, to speak to all the executives at General Motors years ago. I'm talking about life after the 30-second spot. So, I wrote that book in 2004. And I remember it was probably like 2006-ish maybe. And I remember like one of the muckety mucks said to me, Joe, what should we be doing about the blogosphere? And my response was, well, you could buy it. And then with the remaining $3.5 billion, you could buy something else. Like literally General Motors could have bought the entire blogosphere. I'm not even joking. I wasn't just being flippant. Like they could have bought every single automotive related blog, Gizmodo. Like they could have bought Gawker. They could have bought everything at the time and with rounding errors. And they're like, what should we do about the blogosphere? Well, the other thing is just do it, for God's sake. Like do it. Start the blog and then have that endurance and that staying power, right? Monkeys on a keyboard to like keep going and not make it perfect. And it's not that hard. It's not rocket science. It's just advertising.
Yeah. I mean, just to bring it back to the core question and land the plane, there are simple methods that marketers could use to make their lives a lot easier. And one of those is having a simple how'd you hear about us survey that is thoughtfully designed and integrated. And then the only contribution we've really made to this discussion is to say, hey, and then to get a little more insight, instead of sending them to the vanity, you just ask them, to write it in, and using predictive text that'll lighten the load, reduce friction, and you actually won't see drop off on your response rates. And so why do people not do that? In my view, One is it's just one more thing to worry about, and they don't really maybe appreciate the full impact that it could have. And the other thing is, I think you were kind of alluding to this, Joseph, is that it's so simple that it feels like this should be more sophisticated. This should be harder. We need this fancy, shiny time series attribution model, which never works in audio and keeps.
And how are we going to charge for it? And how are we going to charge for it if you're the agency? And that it's not the agency's problem; it's the brand's problem, because the brand and the brand is going back to procurement, saying how many man hours and how much time was spent on it. When just like, listen, if we can come up with the right answer in 3 minutes, then and you'd implement it, then why? Then why wouldn't you? The other thing that's important is, I mean, what do they call it? I just wish I could remember the phrase, but it's something that came up in one of my shows. I'll find it if I can while we're talking and tell you what it is. But it's this idea of like there's empirical versus anecdotal, right? There's hard versus soft metrics. There also are golden metrics, like a golden question that was asked. This was from one of my guests as well, which is they found, this was in the pet food industry, that there was a correlation, a ridiculously strong correlation between do you buy a birthday present for your pet and the incidence or the likelihood of them buying premium dog food or whatever for their pet, right? It was just that question. Did you actually like buy your pet a gift for their birthday? Which would be, and it's intuitive, right? It makes sense. But still, that question more than anything else, demographics, psychographics, blah, 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 was more of a predictor of whether they would be in the market for premium dog food. So sometimes just asking the question, which is, hey, how did you hear about us? And making it easy for them to answer is so much more powerful than that pixel that follows you all the way to the end. And how many times, like, somebody hears it on the radio or whatever, and then they go and they log on to, and they do other things, or they come back in 3 weeks' time. And so, like, it sometimes, I had it on my show today, there's art and there's science. Let's not, and it's not or, it's and. And if we can bring both art and science into these principles, we can actually practice smarter marketing.
Amen. Well, there's one more topic I wanted to touch on really briefly, and I know we're almost out of time, but it's a positive update, and it may be more on the side of the science. There was an update that our good partners at PodScribe are now have now been certified by the IAB Tech Lab for tracking metrics, which has been really, really elusive. For marketers, whether you're an agency or a brand, if you want to know apples to apples comparisons on how many downloads something is getting, whether or not the definition is exactly right, it's helpful to have a standardized methodology just to be able to compare apples to apples. One of the challenges has been that the people we come to for this sort of thing have been acquired by publishers or affiliated with publishers. And so the nice thing about PodScribe is that they are the only measurement provider to be IAB certified who does not sell media. And so finally that's there. And, the IAB methodology, just for a little bit of context, basically it's about how do it's a very in-depth audit that they run to figure out how a download is measured. And it's things like it has to be downloaded for at least 60 seconds of audio. You have to filter out bots. You have to go through a number of criteria, but they have met that criteria. Also, I should disclose, like, we are in deep with PodScribe. We are customers of PodScribe. I'm also an advisor to PodScribe, so we're incentivized for them to do well. So I want to put that out there. But I think where this is important is that having simple metrics to understand consumption is kind of table stakes for any media industry, and we are woefully deficient in this field. I was talking with a publisher who has tools like this as part of their platform, and we've been very, I think, outspoken through our communication vehicles and saying you shouldn't be grading your own paper. There should be third parties that are not on the take deciding whether or not something was downloaded for brand safety, for things that are third-party audits. They should truly be impartial third parties. And yet we know that every industry has charts that are owned by somebody that's, double dipping in the value that they get out of it. It's not as uncommon as we might think. And I think, my conclusion on all this is that you're going to have house brands. You're going to have the Kirkland signature solutions in audio where, yes, we use the publisher's tool because it's free and because it's there, but that's not the gold standard. The gold standard has to come from a third party. So seeing our friends at Podscribe present themselves as this, I think is a big opportunity for the industry to have a third party that they can trust. And I've been really happy because when we first started working with that group, they were basically helping us audit our air checks in an automated way. But what they've expanded out to in terms of capabilities is really an audit of the media aspects of, what is being delivered and giving us ways to verify that through a number of different lenses, whether that's spot load, whether that's how many people in an audience are being served the same ad over and over again and not being served to other members of the audience without intent. They're exposing a lot of these things. There's a lot of verification happening. So this is a big step forward for the industry. And I would just say congratulations to Pete and the folks at Podscribe and to make marketers aware that that's now in place and something worth checking out.
Well, we could go on and on, but we are so thrilled to have you on the show, Joseph. I hope you do come back. And as always, you're a wealth of information on any subject. So thank you so much for coming. One last note, I guess, for our listeners, where can they find you? What's the best way to sort of follow you, engage with you, whether in real time or on demand?
For me, the way to my heart, I'm at Jaffe Juice on all the socials, but for me, my two passion projects right now are my show, Joseph Jaffe is Not Famous on YouTube. Subscribe to the show, bit.ly/subscribe to the show. And then also my audio first morning coffee. You can find that at discord.gg/Alpha Collective. And I'm there. I show up every Monday through Friday, 8 to 9 Eastern Standard Time. And you will have full access to me. It's just, it's a joy. It's a joy to build this intimate, small community in the morning. And then, of course, my show is my baby. Don't call it ugly. You can call me ugly, but not the show.
We wouldn't do either, but the joy is all ours for you coming on the show.
No, always a pleasure.
As always, this show is dedicated to our mission of mobilizing marketers to advance truth and civility in journalism. We want you to not just know the news, but to use it for good. If you're a marketer looking to balance your business objectives with your brand values, reach out to our agency, Oxford Road, by visiting oxfordroad.com and subscribing to our weekly newsletter, The Influencer. Thank you to our guests and to Bianca, Kyle, Haley, and the team at Podcast One. As always, influence responsibly.
McDonald's presents Burger Reviews by Hamburglar. Today's review, the classic Big Mac, Hamburglar. Robble, robble. He said, there's more sauce in every bite. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Brabble. Available at most restaurants in this area.